Main events get remembered, champions get photographed, but every wrestling territory, especially Portland, was built on something just as important. The wrestlers who opened the show, anchored the middle, and made the stars look like stars. They didn't always leave with the belt, but without them, there is no main event. This is the Mid-Card Chronicle, featuring the dependable talents who made every card complete. Ricky Hunter was one of those wrestlers who felt woven into the fabric of the Northwest. He began his wrestling career in 1957 and first came to the Northwest in 1962. He worked the territory off and on through 1965 and then returned in 72 and remained, mostly steadily, through 1981. After that, thanks in part to Pat Patterson, he worked for the WWF until 1991. That kind of longevity doesn't happen by accident. In his Ring Around the Northwest interview, Hunter spoke warmly about Don Owen. Don was like a father to me. He had a few wrestlers that he took under his wing, and I happened to be one of them. I was very lucky and fortunate because Don and Elton Owen were fine brothers. Hunter understood what Portland was and what it wasn't. Some wrestlers would come in bragging about New York, and Don would tell them, "I just got a little chicken shit territory. My guys wrestle hard, and they get paid well. If you don't like it, don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out." That was Portland. No nonsense, wrestle hard, get paid fairly. And Ricky Hunter fit that mold perfectly. One of the most famous stories involving Hunter centers on a shoot encounter with the Iron Sheik during one of Elton Owen's infamous bonus matches, where wrestlers would test each other legitimately. Hunter said, "He was so surprised that he couldn't get behind me. I picked him up and forced him into the ropes. He warned me about 3 or 4 times. 'Rick, if you shoot with me, I might break your arm.' I said, 'No, I don't think you will, Sheik.'" 14 wrestlers stood outside watching. Hunter continues, "The Sheik was sure he was going to turn me inside out. The exact opposite happened. I scuffed his cheekbone up a little bit, and I scuffed up his knee. He became very humble after that." Hunter was an Olympic caliber wrestler. Hunter didn't just belong in the territory. He could handle himself anywhere. In the Northwest, he held only one championship, the Canadian tag title in 1975 with Guy Mitchell. But titles never defined him. He often worked as a gladiator, a masked heel adding another layer to his versatility. In San Francisco, he captured the world tag titles with Pat Patterson, proof again that he could operate at the highest level. Ricky Hunter wasn't flashy. He was trusted. And in a territory built on trust between promoter and performer, that might be the highest compliment of all. When you talk about wrestlers who made the most money in their careers, certain names rise immediately. Gorgeous George, Roddy Piper, Tony Inoki, Sergeant Slaughter. But one name that deserves to be in that conversation, and often isn't, is Carlos Colón. In Portland, he wrestled as Carlos Belafonte. He debuted in the Northwest on October 29, 1970 in Salem, and pulled double duty that night. He defeated Haru Sasaki and then lost to Dutch Savage. His early positioning was interesting. He moved up and down the card. He scored wins over formidable names like The Claw and Mr. Fuji, victories that should have solidified him as the top babyface immediately. He teamed with Beauregard and Tony Bourne for tag wins over Fuji and Sasaki. And during a period when Portland lacked strong babyfaces, Belafonte was elevated quickly. On January 29, 1971 in Eugene, he teamed with Stan Stasiak to defeat the Von Steigers in a Texas death match and won the tag titles. It was a significant win. But the run was short-lived. The Von Steigers regained their titles, and by early March, Belafonte was headed back to Calgary. Looking at the timeline, that likely marked the beginning of his feud with Abdullah the Butcher, a rivalry that would become far more famous elsewhere. In Portland, he was a glimpse. In the larger wrestling world, he became a powerhouse. Sometimes the Northwest wasn't the destination. It was just the proving ground. When Baron Scicluna arrived in January 1973, there was real excitement. He was just 6 months removed from being a WWWF Tag Team Champion with King Curtis. That was a major league pedigree. For Portland fans, that mattered. Scicluna debuted in January of 1973 with a win over Eddie Morrow. He picked up additional victories over Jim Gagne around the circuit. And he began teaming with Bull Ramos in a feud against Dutch Savage and Stephen Littlebear. And he entered into a singles feud with Dutch Savage. But there was a question lingering in the background. Scicluna was born in 1929. By 73, he was already 44 years old. Don Owen always preferred what he called action wrestlers, high energy, fast pace, movement. Scicluna was a different style, more methodical, more deliberate. Just over a month into his Northwest run, he lost a loser leave town match to Dutch Savage. 6 days later, he's wrestling in Pittsburgh. A month after that, he was touring Japan. His Portland stay was brief, but his presence signaled something important. The Northwest could still attract names from the very top level of the industry. He might not have stayed long, but for a moment in 1973, Portland had a man who had worn gold in New York, and that meant something. Not every wrestler becomes a face of a territory. Every territory survived because of the ones who show up night after night and make the card work. The steady hands, the character builders, the glue that held it together. And this has been the Mid-Card Chronicles, because without the middle, there is no main event. This series is based on the Encyclopedia of Portland Wrestlers by historian Mike Rogers, available now on Amazon. New episodes drop every Friday, so be sure to follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube. I'm your host, Frank Culbertson, and thanks for joining us right here on the Mid-Card Chronicle.